Hey everyone, it's Wasim here from Channel Handsome Smiles. Welcome to another video. Today I'll be talking about great animalic fragrances. So animalic fragrances, what is that exactly? So like the name implies, it's a fragrance which has a animal note. Usually, not always the case, but usually. So an animalic fragrance uses a note derived from an animal. For example, musk. Now, real natural raw musk, usually in the past. Now it's very heavily restricted in the modern perfumery in the Western world. Naturally, we used to get that material from a deer, and the deer is usually from Siberia or Kashmir, around that sort of region. I believe there's also a Mongolian deer musk as well. And that deer has a pod, and it's from a male deer, and you have to unfortunately kill the deer in order to get the musk pod. And then the musk pod is how perfume is derived, the note of musk, and then add it to perfume. For example, there's other notes like civet. Now civet is derived from a civet cat. There's notes of castoreum, which is derived from a beaver, and there's a lot of other notes as well out there. But those three notes, musk, civet, and castoreum, is the fragrances I'm going to be talking about today. I may do a video later on this year or maybe next year on other animalic notes. For example, there's ambergris. So ambergris comes from the sperm whale. So it's the vomit of the sperm whale. So the sperm whale excretes that substance. People say it's vomit. Some people say it's actually poop, and that substance just stays in the sea and floats around the sea, and it gathers all the notes of the sea, and then it washes up on the shores of the sea, and it's like a big rock. And then perfumers grind that little rock, and it gets sort of like a powderiness, and then they derive the note of ambergris from that. So I might do another video later on this year or next year regarding other animalic fragrances, but today we'll focus on civet, castoreum, and musk. So let's get this started with a fragrance that was released in 1981, and it's an iconic fragrance. Many people consider it the king, and that is YSL's Yves Saint Laurent's Kouros. So this one was released in 1981, and the animalic note in this fragrance is civet. So this has a beautiful, very pungent, leathery, slightly musky sort of smell. It opens up quite powdery. The opening is quite beautiful, actually. It opens up quite powdery, quite clean. It has this sort of vintage, like a clean smelling sort of powerful gentleman in the opening. It's when the fragrance develops into the heart and the dry down, it gets this sort of musty, slightly leathery sort of muskiness, and it's very, very alluring. It's very sexy, quite raunchy actually. The performance on this on my skin is fantastic. I get around on this formulation. I believe this is a late 2000 formulation because it has the silver cap, so it's not a true vintage. It's not a vintage bottle, say from the 80s or 90s. It's from the late 2000s. I believe it's a 2010 bottle, and the performance I get on this one is around 10 to 12 hours, really long longevity. Projection is very strong. For the first 6 hours it's strong. After that it sits in more in the moderate range. However, the vintage bottles, from what many people have said, and I was quite lucky to try a couple of samples of the vintage, true vintage Kouros, and it was very, very strong. Like, talk about 24 hours of projection and longevity, a true beast, which is why many people consider this the king. The smell of this Kouros, I have to say, it rivals a lot of the niche fragrances and a lot of the indie fragrances as well, that cost about 10 times the price. A really beautiful civet musky scent with a touch of like a leatheriness, really raunchy, sexy sort of smell. But the opening has this gorgeous, clean powderiness, but it really changes in the dry down. So first animalic fragrance we've talked about is Yves Saint Laurent's Kouros, which was released in 1981. And the nose behind this scent, actually, if I've not mentioned, is Pierre Bourdon. Pierre Bourdon, if you know, was the perfumer behind Green Irish Tweed He was also behind Cool Water, so a real legend in the game. And I believe this is considered an aromatic fougere, a very interesting choice. So Kouros is the first one we'll speak about. Next on the list is Hugo Boss, Boss number 1. So this one I believe was released in 1981. I think I've got the notes just this written on my monitor here. I'm just gonna put on my glasses just to double check. So Hugo Boss, yeah, 1985 this was released, and the animalic note in this fragrance is musk. Now there's another animalic note in this, honey, and that's quite a predominant note in this fragrance. Now, if you want to consider honey a animalic note or not is up to you. Obviously, they've not actually used real honey in this. It's actually like a synthetic accord that's created by the perfumer. So how does Hugo Boss number 1 smell? So Hugo Boss number 1, it opens up really interesting. It has the note of honey, like I mentioned, combined with the other notes in there, maybe the musk, and it gives off like a pissy sort of smell in the opening. Some people describe it like a urinal cake. Interestingly, some people describe Kouros having a urinal cake sort of vibe. I don't get it as much in Kouros, but I definitely get it in Boss number 1. So the opening has this real pissy urine sort of quality, which then dries down to have this animalic musky leatheriness on my skin. And for me, the way I would describe Boss number 1 is, imagine a gentleman's bathroom, in a strip club. So it's got the smell of like skank and sexiness and lust and dirtiness of, say, a adult themed club, like a strip club, but it's also got the smell of a gentleman's bathroom. It's got that pissy sort of smell. Now, I know that sounds disgusting, but this fragrance actually smells so sophisticated and very classy. Like imagine the Wolf of Wall Street, Leonardo DiCaprio in that film. This is the sort of fragrance I would imagine him wearing, and he's got a suit on with those stripes, and it really shows that off because the bottle, I'm not sure if my camera picks up, has those sort of stripes. This is like Patrick Bateman in American Psycho. If you watch that film with Christian Bale, this is the sort of fragrance I would imagine him wearing. It's got this sophisticated sort of smell, like upper gentleman sort of smell, someone who's quite doing quite well in his life, but there's a touch of a dirtiness or a lustiness in him, which you can't really tell. So even another example would be the gentleman that plays the lead role in 50 Shades of Grey. Now, I've not watched that film or read the book, but I've seen trailers of that film come up when I'm watching something on YouTube, so to speak, many years ago. And this is a sort of the scent that sort of describes him, Hugo Boss number 1. So it opens up with that sort of pissy urinal quality, but then it dries down, has this real leathery sort of smell on your skin and lovely muskiness. Boss number 1 from the house of Hugo Boss, released in 1985. Okay, now let's move over to the house of Chanel. This is a real beauty, also released the same year as Kouros. This one was released in 1981. I believe the nose behind this was Jacques Polge, or Olivier Polge. I can't really remember on the top of my head which one now. It's a father and son duo, but I believe this was done by the father Polge, not the son Polge. The son Polge, I believe, created Bleu de Chanel. This one was created by the father back in 1981. So the note behind this scent, the animalic note on this one, is Castoreum. Now, Castoreum comes from the note is derived from a beaver. So how does this one smell? This one opens up very, very beautiful. I get gorgeous, like bright citruses, almost like a note of aldehydes, and it quickly then goes into the heart with some florals. The main note that I get in the heart is the jasmine. And I don't think many people pick up the jasmine in this, but on my skin it really is beautiful, very bright and gorgeous. Beautiful jasmine. Many people say they pick up the rose in the heart. Personally, I don't pick up too much rose in Antaeus. For me, it's mostly the jasmine in the heart. So the opening, like I've said, citrusy and aldehyde. In the heart is the gorgeous floral note, especially the jasmine on my skin. And in the dry down, it gets this beautiful, quite leathery sort of Castoreum note, and it also has, for me, like a resinous sort of smell, possibly coming from like a labdanum and some myrrh in this. So it has a resinous sort of leathery feel in the dry down. This smells really professional, very, very upper class. This is totally a formal scent. It does have a vintage vibe. Imagine this is a true 80s sort of smell, but it doesn't, for me, smell dated. It smells like a older gentleman, but a strong professional older gentleman. Antaeus, the name Antaeus itself is from Greek mythology. So Antaeus was a half human and half demigod, half god. So a demigod. So a demigod is basically half human and half mythological Greek god. So Antaeus was a person who had the strength of a god, but also had the softness of a human being, and that's the sort of scent that Antaeus gives me. It's a sort of a yin and yang of the strength coming from the animalic notes of the leather. There's some labdanum and myrrh in here, and it's mixing with some softer notes such as the jasmine, and for some people the rose. So real big yin and yang, and very beautifully balanced sort of scent. Gorgeous fragrance, really high class, high quality. The bottle itself is just beautiful and gorgeous. Look at that. It's this beautiful black bottle, white lettering, classic Chanel logo as well. Real gorgeous bottle in my collection. That's Antaeus from the house of Chanel. So let's move over to a fragrance that was released in 1974, and this one is from the house of Givenchy, and this is Givenchy's Gentleman. So released all the way back in 1974. The note, the animalic note in this one is the note of the civet, and in the opening, this has a beautiful civet opening on my skin. It has this deep, sort of musky, leathery sort of smell on my skin. But along with that, I also pick up a gorgeous patchouli as well. The patchouli really gives off this sort of earthy, slightly bright sort of quality on my skin. Earthy, slightly pungent wetness as well. As the fragrance dries down, it picks up a lot of sweetness. This is a newer batch. So the dry down on me from this newer batch is a lot more sweeter. I get a little bit more honey in the dry down of this. I was very lucky to try a small sample of the vintage one, and that one really, it sticks more on the civet, the leatheriness and the patchouli, but the newer formulation is a little bit more on the honey side. Performance on this one is quite good on my skin. I get around 6 to 7 hours of longevity. Projection is quite strong for the first 3 hours. After that, it sits a little bit more on the moderate range, but a really beautiful sort of animalic scent all the way back from the 70s. Again, this one smells quite professional, quite sophisticated. It smells of that time from the 70s, a true powerhouse sort of fragrance, Givenchy's Gentleman. Forgot to mention the performance for Hugo Boss #1. This one, I get around 8 hours of longevity. Projection is very good for the first 3 hours. After that, it sits a little bit closer to the skin, but in the moderate range, so I'm still able to detect this quite easily. Antaeus, on the other hand, is a beast on my skin. Around 10 to 12 hours of longevity with really strong projection throughout. It really doesn't become a skin scent on my skin. Very, very strong one. And this is a recent batch from 2020. So we've talked about 4 fragrances. So 4 fragrances I've spoke about so far. These 4 have been designer fragrances. So let's move over to niche now. This one is Yatagan from the house of Caron, and I mentioned this as a niche fragrance. However, this is a very affordable niche fragrance. Yatagan, you can pick this up. I picked this bottle up for £50. I had to order this one in from France. It's quite difficult to really get these in the UK. But I believe some discounters used to sell these in the past for around £30. And this is a 125ml bottle. So for £50, that's an absolute bargain for a niche fragrance as well. So Caron is a house which was started all the way in the early 1900s. I believe 1904 it was created, and it was created by a Jewish gentleman at that time in France. And unfortunately, he was facing persecution due to the treatment of Jews during that time, and he moved over to America. But he was behind a lot of the earlier fragrances, most notably Caron Pour-Homme, the lavender-based and vanilla-based fragrance. But Yatagan was created by another perfumer. This one was released in 1978. So the second oldest in this list, the first oldest one was Givency Gentleman that I just previously spoke about. So yet again, how does this one smell? And the animalic note in this one is Castoreum. So the opening of Yatagan is quite a treat if you love animalic fragrances. The opening is quite pungent. I remember the opening of this fragrance when I first did my first impressions of Yatagan. I mentioned that it smelled like smelling the bare, hairy and sweaty chest of a man. So the way the opening reminded me when I first smelled and did my first impressions was it smelled like you were hugging Ron Jeremy after he's just finished shooting a scene, and it was quite a strange opening. However, as the fragrance develops on your skin, the first blast is animalic, very leathery and quite pungent on your skin. But as the fragrance develops, it has a beautiful greenness, like foresty sort of greenness. It has the note of Artemisia. There's a note of basil in here as well, and it gives off a beautiful like herb greenness. Imagine walking through a forest in the Western world, or a Canadian sort of forest, like a pine forest. That's the sort of vibe that the opening gives after it moves on from the animalicness in the opening. Along with that, I also pick up a beautiful note of Luban, also known as frankincense. And I think many people don't really mention the note of the frankincense in here, but it's absolutely beautiful. For me, it smells like you're walking in a forest and you've just seen sort of like a temple or a church, and it's giving off this smell of like incense in the forest. Deep into the dry down, it becomes quite woody, quite resinous, and it has a touch of that leatheriness as well. The leatheriness doesn't really go throughout the scent. It just becomes a little bit more subdued compared to the opening. It gets subdued by the greenness and then the touch of the incense as well, and then the woodiness in the dry down. In terms of performance, this lasts on my skin around 6 to 8 hours. It's not a beast, even though the opening does feel like it's going to be quite a beastly scent. And the projection is very good for the first 3 hours. After the 3 hour mark, it sits a little bit more closer to the skin. But a real beautiful fragrance that's not talked about much, and I think it's a hidden gem. That's Yatagan from the house of Caron. So that was the fifth fragrance, first niche one. Let's move over and talk about another niche fragrance. And this is from the house of Frederic Malle. And this one was released in the year 2000 and created by Maurice Roussel. This one is Musc Ravageur. And as the name suggests, the animalic note in this one is musk. So Maurice Roussel is a real legendary, quite very well respected perfumer in the perfume world. Some of the fragrances he's released are New Harlem by Bond Number 9. He's also released a cheap fragrance. The name has just gone off on my head. It's a blue Nautica Voyage. Nautica Voyage is another fragrance that Maurice Roussel was behind. So he's been behind really cheap fragrances, some designer fragrances, and he's also been behind high-end niche fragrances as well. So Musc Ravageur, it opens up quite bombastic on my skin. It has this real blast of musk, clove, musk and clove in the opening. It's a real blast of musk and clove with an orange sort of citrus. The clove really overpowers in the opening, but the musk is really in the background, and it has a touch of orange in the opening as well. The opening is something that many people struggle with. I find the opening just really interesting, so unique, and I absolutely adore the opening. As the fragrance develops, it becomes sweeter and sweeter due to the note of the vanilla, and the the clove, the spiciness, it gets a little bit more subdued, but it's still there, and it works really well with the vanilla. So it's like a beautiful, smooth, sweet vanilla scent with a touch of warm spiciness. And in there, just underneath all of that, is a beautiful, gorgeous musk. Now, the musk in this is, I'm sure, a synthetic musk, but I think Maurice Roussel created this in order to smell like a real musk without using the natural muskiness in a scent. Many people consider this to be like a date scent. Personally, the opening would not be a date scent, but the dry down definitely is, because the vanilla, smooth, sweet, really cozy vanilla. I absolutely adore wearing Musc Ravageur in the winter when it's very cold. I remember I used to have a decant of this about 10 years ago. I did a review of Musc Ravageur about 10 years ago, and I absolutely loved wearing this in the winter. The winter is where this one really shines, because it's like wearing a warm blanket. It's so nice and cozy. The vanilla is like a warm blanket, and there's just so much interesting notes in this where it keeps it stops it becoming just a bland vanilla scent, because it's got the clove, it's got that touch of musk in here as well. In terms of performance, this lasts around 10 hours on my skin. Projection very strong for the first 6 hours. After that, it sits a little bit more closer to the skin, especially when it gets down to the vanilla stage. It becomes a little bit more moderate, but the opening is very strong, beastly sort of clove and musky opening with that touch of orange citrus. So high niche pick for Animalic scent is Musc Ravageur from the house of Frederic Malle. Really beautiful bottle as well. Very lucky to have 100ml in my collection. I'm looking to get a Portrait of a Lady as well from Frederic Malle. I'm just waiting for a good deal to come on, and then I think I'll have my Frederic Malle collection complete. There's other fragrances in their collection, but those two for me are the real standouts. Okay, the final Animalic fragrance we're going to be talking about today is not a niche fragrance. So we've spoken about niche, we spoke about designers at the start of the video, but ending the video is going to be an indie house or an independent perfumer house. So this is Siberian Musc Part 3 from the house of Areej Doré. Now, Areej Doré is headed up by a gentleman called Russian Adam, who started off an oud company called Feel Oud, I believe 10 years ago. And he set up the Areej Doré house, I believe, in 2017. And their mission, their aim, their sort of mantra of creating perfume is using the best natural ingredients that he can find. Now, a lot of their fragrances use very vintage notes, so he's able to acquire and source like oils from the 1920s. He's acquired lavender oil from the 1910s. He also acquires genuine, real, raw ingredients. So the musk in here is a real musk. So I believe the musk in here is Siberian musk, if I remember the note list. He's actually got the pods, and he's extracted the note of musk from the musk pods himself. Russian Adam, if I would tell you guys to watch his videos on YouTube. It's just so fascinating, the way he gets oud. So he gets the wood, he distills the oud himself from the wood. He distills so many other ingredients as well, like sandalwood, like jasmine as well. His utters as well, that the company Feel Oud that releases utters. The distillation of the utters is incredible as well with Bortnikov. So he really is a master of natural perfumery. And the smell of this, so Siberian musk, if I just give it a split on this card, I've only worn this, I believe, once or twice, and I need to wear this fragrance at least 10 times for me to be able to really understand how it works and to be confident enough to be able to talk about it or give a review on camera, because it's such a complex fragrance, and a lot of the Areej Doré fragrance are complex. But the time that I did wear this and my first impressions all that time ago, this is a beautiful, sensual sort of musk. And the smell of this one, and a lot of fragrances from this house, it's sort of it's on a different level. it takes you to a different dimension. This one released in 2023, so it's the youngest fragrance, but it's, when you smell this, it's like you're smelling a perfume from the 1900s, early 1900s, late 1800s. It transports you to another century in the past. The opening is like this beautiful old ancient woodiness. There's a touch of greenness in here, and as the fragrance develops, it has that muskiness, and the muskiness in this is real deer musk. And the real deer musk, it has this very sensual, beautiful, sexy sort of vibe, but the sexiness is like a clean sort of sexiness. It's not a lusty sexiness, say the lusty sort of muskiness that you get in Hugo Boss #1. This is like the smell of like hugging a loved one, a beautiful loved one, like your wife. It's like that sort of sensual, beautiful love. That's the sort of smell that this Siberian musk gives me. The musk is really used as like an aphrodisiac, and this one is aphrodisiac in a bottle. It has that beautiful sort of muskiness in here. There's other notes as well. There's greenness in the opening that I pick up. There's woodiness in here. I'm sure there's a touch of oud. I'm sure there's some sort of sweetness in here as well. So many different facets in this one. A real true gem. Unfortunately, I believe this one is discontinued. As you would imagine, his fragrances are always limited editions. So I wanted to put this in the list, but I was going to keep it as the last fragrance to talk about, just to show you what animalic fragrances are out there. So I'm going to end my list with Siberian Musk Part 3. In terms of performance, this one just never gives up on your skin. It's around 24 hours of longevity. I could smell it in the shower the next day when I was having a shower. Projection is very strong for like the 10 hours. After that, it sits a little bit more in the moderate range, but it's like beastly for the first 10 hours. So absolutely amazing. Siberian Musk 3 from the house of Areej Doré. So guys, those are 7, I believe. So, yep, 7 animalic fragrances that I've spoken to you about today, focusing mainly on 3 animalic notes of Musc, Castoreum and Civet. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do leave me a like and a comment below. Have you got any experience of these fragrances? I'd love to know. If you have any suggestions for other fragrances, then please do let me know in the comment section below. If you haven't subscribed, please make sure you do. Until next time, my friends, see you later.